when you spend money, you're choosing one of two perspectives, either an eternal perspective or a materialistic perspective.
And what we'll see today is what happens when people choose the materialistic perspective. We talked at the beginning and we said, you have to understand where you are. Where are you financially? We talked about 3 statements. We talked about a budget. We talked about a balance sheet. We talked about an income statement. Today is the final piece of that puzzle, and that is financial ratios. So we've done problems here in class where we've done balance sheets. We've done problems where they do budgets. We've done problems where you've done income statements. Now what we want to do is we want to put it all together. So what questions should you ask about your spending? What are the key questions you should ask? We want to make sure that we're on track for our goals. What are the key questions we should ask? Mary, what did you guys come up with?
Yeah, we talked about asking is it necessary?
Okay.
We also talked about can I afford these purchases that I'm doing? And then Christine brought up some really good points about making sure that we would have enough with this. If we were spending this amount of money, would we have enough to still be saving? And,
so much to achieve our other goals. The direction of this discussion here is really just, is it a need versus a want? Are there more basic questions? Are there more basic questions we should be asking?
Can I afford it?
Well,
that's what I thought
afford
of.
it.
That's what I was thinking.
And one of the biggest ones was, can we buy it without going into debt? And realize with every decision we make, there's an opportunity cost. I actually told you that my generation are driving their retirement spending. What they should have been spending for retirement, they're using with cars, things like that. But here's some additional questions. In addition to yours, those questions are good, but there's some basic questions too, such as, do you have enough liquidity to meet your obligations? Nothing worse than you having a bill that you need to pay. You got all your money tied up in a car and a house that's going to take months to get it out. Questions like, do you have your ability to meet your debt obligations? Again, many people would never think of not paying their tithing, but pretty soon they get into so much debt.
They can't pay their tithing.
They can't pay their tithing. And then savings, are you saving as much as you think you are or you should? Again, the scripture says, let the solemnities of eternity rest on your mind. Are we thinking longer term at the time that will come in the future when we no longer have an income to come in? When you talk about liquidity, what is it, Xander?
Christine? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Xander.
Okay, sorry.
Basically the ability to turn assets into cash quickly.
Yeah, you have turned assets into cash quickly. Someone in the previous class says, well, I used to have an emergency fund and now I just put it all in investments. And actually now, some of the, if you do no-load mutual funds, on Monday I put in, we needed some cash because we're helping our grandkids, putting some money into 529 plans. And so we put the order on Monday and by Thursday we had the money. So liquidity is in some areas.
How fast you can get the money.
Yeah, it's how fast you can get the money. Couple of good ratios, current ratio, month's living expense coverage ratio. So do you have enough money to pay for unexpected large expenses or to tide you over during a period of reduced or eliminated earnings? I graduated with my MBA. I got a job with a subsidiary of General Electric. I thought I was doing great. And then 6 months later, I lost my job because the bottom fell out of the shipping market, and I was the last one hired. Not a fun time. But those are the things we need to prepare for. So let's talk about these two ratios. Current ratio is just your current assets divided by your current liabilities. How many times could you pay off your current liabilities with your current assets? Generally, they like a ratio of about 2. So you could pay it over twice. Ideally, track the trend. If it's going down, you need to make changes. Caution is this ratio doesn't consider long-term assets or long-term liabilities for that matter. A ratio that I think is a little bit more important is what's called a living expense covered ratio. So if you lost your job, how long could you survive? Again, that was my case. And I had about 4 months living expenses covered. It took me 6 months to find a job, so the last couple of months was a little tight. Again, so this one takes your current assets divided by your monthly living expenses. So how long could you survive? Ideally, you'd like it 3 to 6 months. Again, track the trend. If it's going, if you're covering less period, if it's going down, you need to make some adjustments.
And also, 3 to 6 months is a recommended, but if you have a high-paying job and you lose that job, it's going to be harder to find a higher-paying job. It might take you 12 months to find a new job.
When
so
I lost
you might need more.
When I lost my job, the rule of thumb is it's going to take you a month for every $10,000 in salary. So if you want a $60,000 job, it'll probably take you 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't making much, so it wasn't that bad. And then the second set of questions relates to debt. You know, can you meet your debt obligations? 2 key ratios here. One is your debt ratio, and the second one is your long-term debt coverage ratio. How long could you cover your debts if you lost your job? So the debt ratio is pretty simple. It's just current total liabilities divided by total assets. So that tells you what percent of your assets are financed by debt.
And we're hoping to get that down to 0.
Yeah. A 0 debt ratio is a great goal. We can tell you, we especially as you go into retirement, you want to make sure your house is paid off. You want to make sure all of your vehicles are paid off. So then it's basically other things that you need to live on. So total liabilities over total assets, I like that one. And then the long-term debt coverage ratio is a little bit different. So it takes your after-tax income and your long-term debt payments. It says, how long could you make monthly payments on your debt based on your income after taxes? And the inverse of this is your debt service ratio. What percent of your income after taxes goes to make long-term debt payments? I was working with this couple, and they couldn't understand why all these debt collectors were calling them. And so we sat down with them, and 82% of their income after taxes went to paying long-term debt payments. And you can't survive in that situation. So it took some major work. So ideally, your long-term debt coverage ratio, you want to have a much larger one. And again, when you have no debt, this is an infinity ratio.
That's the best.
And then savings ratio. Are you saving as much as you can? The problem with not working on a budget and not doing a balance sheet, you don't know how you're doing. You don't know if you're improving or if you don't know if you're getting worse. So 2 ratios, percent of your income, your savings, your net savings ratio, and then your gross savings ratio. Net savings ratio is just how much you saved divided by your income after taxes. In the US, it's typically -1 to 8%. What do we recommend? We recommend a minimum of 10% and 20% once you get out of school. Minimum of 10% and hopefully 20% once you get out of school. If you're in a position you can do more, it's so much better. But you know that they didn't have what we called a gross savings ratio, and I thought we pay our tithing on gross. Shouldn't I pay myself on gross too? So we created what we call a gross savings ratio. And that's just gross income, your total savings divided by your total income. And again, typically 1 to 7%. Ideally, track the trend. If it's going down, you need to make some changes. We would hope you would set some goal once you get out of college to save a minimum of 20%. And we'll actually share some figures. When we talk about retirement, what we found out is if people will save somewhere between 15 and 20%, they can hit some reasonable retirement goals. So, and then we find out it works for us as well too.